Welcome to the Inspirational Insights, Insight to Action podcast. My name is Donna Jones. I'm your host, and with me today is Marek Zmysłowski, the author of Chasing, he's Polish. I had fun, figuring out how to say this properly. He's the author of Chasing Black Unicorns, How Building the Amazon of Africa on Interpol's Most Wanted List, which I had the pleasure of reading over the weekend. Welcome, Mark.
Donna, it's great to be here.
Just to give you a bit of background, I love the little promo on Mark's book because it's where Silicon Valley meets Indiana Jones. And I read that and I thought, and then I read the book and I thought, yeah, okay, you have just been a lot. The book is centered in what happened in Nigeria, but your whole story covers just the romp through all kinds of unexpected, crazy conditions that showed up. I mean, I love the whole online network of funeral services and the mafiosa back end, it's like, whoa. And just how you came to where you are today. I would really appreciate knowing what was the worst setback and how did you recover from it?
Yeah, just to comment on what you said, I really had some crazy adventures in my life, and I figured out that when you make stupid decisions in life sometimes, but you're lucky, then your life is interesting. Because if you're not lucky, you won't get a chance to talk about the stories because you won't be here anymore. And in business, I always liked to choose sectors when competition does not become big anytime soon because everyone else is not thinking about doing it. This is why I landed in funeral business, and then this is why I landed in Nigeria later. But to answer your question about my setbacks, there's been so many. I think
that's why I thought you'd have a bit of a menu. It's like
yeah. What should I go with today? I think definitely my biggest challenge is the one which also made me write the book, and it was the fact that for 2 years of my life, I was actually living in fear of being extradited to Nigeria, where I knew I would spend at least a couple months in jail. And I'm either going to have to sign all the papers anyone would give me, which will mean giving out my company for free and losing everything I have built. Because if I don't do this, I will spend even more years in this particular jail. And living with that fear of not knowing whether the extradition request is granted or not and what's going to happen to me was the most challenging time of my life, both psychologically and physically, because everything then goes from there. But also, thank God it happened. It ended with a happy end. So now it's a setback that made me stronger, but it was the biggest setback of all my life.
Yeah, you could really say in looking at the ups and downs and the dips and dives you've been through in your life that you've been in resilience training for quite some time. It's just so many places where you could have died, but you didn't.
That is true. Yeah, I've had a lot of things that could have destroyed many people, but I guess with every next adversity you're going through, you're either going to destroy yourself or you're going to somehow get stronger. And I think I was lucky to go the route of getting stronger instead of getting crushed. And so I thought about this. I think that part of my personality is that I like chaos, and challenges are fun because you kind of have to think about it all the time, and it's not boring. I actually had most of the most depressing time of my life, besides this whole drama, was when I kind of felt like I've achieved everything I wanted, and that's where the depression comes. Because what reason now to get out of bed? As cheesy as it sounds, the journey is the fun, not achieving the goal. So as long as you have tons of challenges, but you see a way out, that's the fun part, because you know that there's a way out. Obviously, you don't want to be in a situation when you kind of give up because you see no way out. You don't want to be there. But you also don't want to be too long in a situation when, I've built this business I wanted. I have the money I wanted. So what now? Is this a retirement part? That's not a comfortable place to be in if you can't find anything for yourself, new challenge.
Now, what's interesting about that is your experience is dealing with uncertainty. And here we've got a world that's been dealing with uncertainty. And I know for you, this whole process of being, well, you've been in lockdown for a bit, but the point is that uncertainty is a kind of actually friendly place. It's a good place to be because it's where you have to dip into your most creative decisions, I suspect.
I see that in a similar way. And the metaphor that always comes to my mind when I talk about certainty is about relying on what people think about you. When you don't care about what people think, you don't care about the positive things, and you also don't care about the negative things, you're in a comfortable place because you just do your thing. When you accept uncertainty, you kind of become free because you're in the stable place where uncertainty is stable. And you release yourself from the fake illusion of stability, which is now all over the place. And part of me is actually laughing at all those people that were making certain life choices or business choices for the sake of chasing stability, and now they realize how illusional that was, and also how the paradigm changes of thinking about that. And I like to say now that, if you are freaking out during this crisis, then I hope that this is your first crisis, because if this is your second or third, then you're doing something wrong. I've made my first big money in 2004-5. That was in the middle of economical boom in Poland. Literally everything you were touching could turn into gold, as long as you were not too stupid and you were not lazy. And then I lost everything during 2008 financial crisis. And that was my first depression. And then obviously I had all that drama, including Interpol and corrupt Nigerian police and so on. So you can imagine like how upset or stressed I am during this particular lockdown. I'm actually enjoying my house because I've never been so long in my house.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I don't want to dip too much into the contents of your book because I want people to read it. It's so much fun. I mean, just watching you go through the ride. And I've been around the world a couple of times. I've been in some crazy situations as well, but not too many of them would rival the position you've been in. I would appreciate you telling the story about the rescuing this poor Polish woman who made a series of bad decisions.
Actually, you're the first person that asked me about this particular story, so I'm happy to tell that. So when you live in a country like Nigeria, and I moved there 2012, and I was living there till 2016, so it was 4 years, it's just a matter of time when crazy adventures start getting to you. It's not like you even have to search for them. I was approached, I think that was started on Facebook by some Polish lady, because obviously she found me because there was this Polish guy in Nigeria. There were some newspapers writing about me at that time, and she really started stalking me. And at some point I was like, okay, let's have a phone call. What do you want from me? And then she gave me the story of her sister. Her sister was living in London or somewhere in the UK. She met a charming Nigerian guy. He told her, obviously, that he is a son of a king, as they usually are. What they don't tell is that every village in Nigeria has a king, and so on. And they got married, and everything was great. And after a couple of months, the Nigerian husband, his visa was about to expire, so he had to go back to Nigeria. He took her in with, and that's where she realized how it really is to live in Nigeria, in a village without power, electricity, and so on. Obviously, there are amazing people also in Nigeria, and I have met many women that had amazing Nigerian husbands, but they're also dicks and assholes. And long story short, she wanted to get out of him, but the moment she decided to divorce him, this guy totally changed and essentially kidnapped her. I don't know if you can use the word kidnapping your wife, but she was not allowed to leave the house anymore, and she was allowed to call her family only once per week, and she had to talk in a code language, so the other people realized that she's actually in danger, and it took months until they figured out what's happening, where she is. And her sister couldn't get any help from the Polish embassy because officially, Polish embassy is not going to send anyone to rescue essentially an ordinary citizen. What a Polish embassy can do is call the Nigerian police, which obviously wasn't the case because this guy had them in his pocket. So I got an information from the Polish ambassador that, if I find a way to bring her in, they can take her over then and send her back to Nigeria. And I thought I'm a hero. I played a hero, and I basically, it was a town in the north of Nigeria. I took first a flight to the closest city that I knew, and then I took a cab right there because I thought I'm just gonna get her out. And how stupid I was, because the moment I reached out to that village, the whole village already knew that there's this white guy that is probably searching for the other white lady. So I was not able to get to her, and I was kicked out essentially from the village. But then how I would love to finish the story with some crazy adventure of me being super heroic. I ended up calling a friend who knew a general, and the general sent his military guys. It took them a couple of hours just to take her out because no one dared to mess with the military guys. They brought her back to Abuja, which was the capital of Lagos, and I just met her, gave her some cash so she could survive. We put her in the hotel, and then the ambassador came in and brought her out. So essentially, there's not really nothing heroic, and the happy ending is so average. But it doesn't happen every day in the United States or in Poland that someone asks you to help that person rescue her sister because she's being kidnapped in her own house by her own husband. So welcome to my life.
The reason why I love the whole conversation is, first of all, you went up there and then you kind of went, there's some variables I hadn't taken into account.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Boko Haram. It's their territory on top of that, which is a whole other layer of craziness. There was that part of it, but it's just you knew who to call. That was the part, when you sort of think, okay, you spend 4 years in Nigeria and you know who to call and they do it for you. I mean, that's huge. That's huge.
It's great and also scary at the same time, because when you're running a business in a country like Nigeria, and it was the same thing in Poland in the early 90s, when everywhere there's an early stage of an economy, unfortunately corruption is inevitable. And at some point, once your company gets bigger, you're going to get attention of the bad guys. And having someone to call to help you with is great when you know who to call, but also to live with the fact that you have to know this type of people because things like this happen and you need to know them to protect yourself. That's also like uncomfortable and scary at the same time,
Yeah.
Which is really what got me into trouble, because everyone told me, oh, you're opening another company in Nigeria, you need to have protection because you're not already incognito in Nigeria. At some point, some government people or some corrupt police officer can start hurting you if you don't pay them for protection, quote unquote. So you need to have a proper, strong Nigerian business partner to be your partner and your godfather, essentially. What they don't tell you is that sometimes the people that are supposed to protect you are the ones that treat you not the nicest way. So I guess nothing here is black and white. Everything has its backside, upsides and downsides in that matter. Yeah.
Of course, that's the beautiful aspect of the gray complexity zone. So all these variables coming together.
You've been to Africa, right? I remember you told me. So you kind of know what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been a couple of times, and one of them was when I was a teenager and we were traveling through, and at that time they were kidnapping blonde girls for their special purposes. And they hid me in the back of the van. And I'd forgotten all about this, but they hid me in the back of the van, put cushions on top of it, and managed to talk the gorillas out of taking me, which was a really good thing. And there was my 3 brothers and my mom and I, and they said, oh, look, she's too old. My mom was too old, and they didn't fortunately, they didn't take the van apart. But that's how I got through that.
Yeah, another crazy story. Huh?
Yeah, but it's all part of the, it's one of the most interesting and fascinating continents in the world, I think. And I love Africa. It's truly fascinating.
The proportion and the balance between how much risk you have to take, but also what's the potential price, whether it's quantifiable in terms of financial success or just the sheer amounts of adventures you can have that you will never forget for the rest of your life. It's worth it. I mean, you go there as long as you know what's the risk you're putting yourself into. It's absolutely worth it, because there are regions in the world when the risk is also very bad, but the potential reward is much lower. So the upsides kind of rewards the downside. Yeah,
that's a good way of putting it. What has crisis taught you? I mean, we've alluded to the fact that this book is about the whole experience of being an entrepreneur that's an edge rider, essentially, always riding that chaotic edge. But you've also been through crisis after crisis, not the least of which is the shock of being arrested and being, on the Interpol's most wanted list. What's it taught you about who you are and what's possible?
It has definitely gave me confidence that I'm able to go through some hard stuff. It has definitely helped me put things into perspective. I mean, there's really not many things that can piss me off anymore because I know how hard life can get sometimes. So what crisis has taught me is how to remain calm in your life, because really, we are living a very comfortable life. I've lived in Nigeria for a couple of years. I've seen people that have absolutely nothing, and they are many times happier than we are living in the first war and having all the life comforts you could ever imagine. So it put things into perspective, made me much more peaceful and actually happy. And we can talk hours how this increases the comfort of your life on a daily basis.
Yeah, because no matter what's going on around you, you still got a calm anchor inside. And I think that is really the opportunity that the COVID interruption or the experience, that the pandemic that people are experiencing, it gives, is the chance to learn how to train yourself to be calm in crisis, no matter what.
Absolutely. It's like a vaccine. It's you couldn't imagine a better crisis. Like, we're stuck at home. We have to reconnect with the people around us. We have time to think. We have access to electricity still. Internet is working. We have a chance to complain. The food is there. The nature has the time to rebuild itself. If someone designed this crisis, it was a smart design for the humanity.
I couldn't agree with you more. It's a perfect interruption. Let me ask you something. You mentioned in the book, and I love this because I'm a bit of a nerd about biology and stuff, but you mentioned that executives paid, quote, little attention to how our body and brain biology affects our performance. What did you mean by that? Because there's an awful lot of executives that are completely oblivious to that.
Yeah, so everything started when I turned 30, and two things happened in my life. Suddenly you realize that you can't just have 4 beers and then the next day wake up as if nothing happened. Sometimes you have a 1 week hangover after 4 beers. And then, of course, my father passed away in a very abrupt way. My father was an ex-military guy. He was 45 and he was still running marathons, and he had a 6-pack and stuff like this. So I always was living under the impression that I am invincible because I have the best genes ever, because I looked at my dad. And then suddenly he just died because he had an undiagnosed genetic condition. So that kind of changed my whole paradigm. And I really got myself into biology, because then you realize we've put the man on the moon. So they say, just kidding. But we don't really know what's happening. We don't know the basic stuff that are happening into our body. We live under this assumption that our medicine is such an amazing thing. It's almost like magic. But the medicine is really magical when it comes down to saving you from an accident or from some acute situation. The medicine is really very, very backwards in terms of making our lives and our bodies healthy in the long term. And the world we live in is actually destroying us, but it's a very, very slow death. So I was like, I want to treat my body also like my project. And I want to understand how my biology affects my decision making as a business person, because I read this book, The Power of When you realize that the same judge makes different decisions about the same cases depending if it was 8 a.m. or 2 p.m. And then I was like getting deeper and deeper into this, down to the rabbit hole. I started to analyze how the amount of flora, microflora, amount of bacteria, forgive me, my English is not my best, how it affects your general mood, how your hormones level affect how you basically think. And these are all the basics that you kind of get mentioned in biology, but obviously you never pay attention to it when you're in high school because you care about other stuff. And I got myself into this health and fitness and longevity thing, not because, I was crazy about saving animals and stuff like that. I was like, okay, so what do I have to do to be a better manager and more successful entrepreneur? What type of sport do I have to practice in order to be happier or more efficient? If I'm an accountant, I'm probably gonna want to practice a different sport than when I'm a CEO, because maybe I have more adrenaline at work than I need that sport. Again, I used to play volleyball when I was 20, but it's an amazing sport, but you get a lot of injuries. So when you reach 30 and 40, you want to switch to sports that kind of protect you more than really use your body. And on every aspect of my biology, whether it's my skin, my stomach, my activity, hormone levels, I always look at it from the context of how this affects my body and my decisions, my alertness in a way that I'm not aware of, but it still kind of controls what type of a machine I am. I'm not sure if that makes sense. And I really got myself into this rabbit hole.
It's a rabbit hole I've been down. I completely understand, because once you start understanding it from a biodynamic point of view, the whole world starts making a whole lot more sense. You appreciate the importance of what food am I putting in? What's my social environment? How am I thinking? How is my thinking affecting my it sort of hits at you on all these dimensions, which all of a sudden gives you a whole lot more control about how you experience life, because once you become aware of it, then you can take action on it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Pretty handy indeed. When you're looking at executives today, what can they do that would help them make better decisions? I mean, you're an entrepreneur, so you're used to edge riding. A lot of these executives may or may not be used to that. There's a lot of executives that are really relying on very past beliefs and old practices. What can they do that would up their game at this point?
I mean, on one side, human brain is such an amazing organism or a machine that allows you to believe at two contradictory things at once. We're so great at it. Look at religion. Look at smokers that know that smoking kills, but they're still smoking. We're very good at it. At the same time, when we enter our business world, we forget about this and we become extremely rational. Every successful executive is ruthless about data, is ruthless about statistics. In God we trust, everyone else bring data, and so on and so on. And if they only kind of took this approach of how they're running their successful business and took at least part of it and applied it to the way they approach data about their body and all the information that is given to them from the outside world, their lives would change by an order of magnitude. Let's start with being able and having a proper habit to collect enough data about your body. Like how many times do you look into your Excel about how your company is operating, and when was the last time you've checked the numbers of your blood result to start with? When there's an issue with your company, you would never believe only one person because you feel like what she's saying makes sense. You want to hear to the different side. Yet you're so excited when you found one article that says that red wine is not that bad, because you're just cherry picking whatever fits your current preferences. You kind of forget about all those rational aspects that made you successful in business when it comes down to personal life. And I believe there's a lot to change if we kind of learn, take the good things about personal life, bring them into business. Be less of an asshole, more of a understanding boss, and also from business bring that concept of being hard on the problems, soft on the people, looking at data, not intuitive things that intuitively you buy but are not necessarily true.
Oh gosh, I appreciate you saying that, because what we're really talking about in intuition is pattern recognition. And just I noticed in the book a number of times you mentioned, and confirmation bias kicked in, and you noticed the patterns that you followed in making your decisions, and that's huge, because at least then you can sort of interrupt it, interrupt the pattern and just go, what am I relying upon here? You can ask yourself, you can do that check before making the next decision. And I also appreciate what you said about just that decision-making side of it, where, this whole business about rational and intuitive being two separate departments, and the executives think that better decisions are not made relying on rational. They're made when you put those two together. So thanks for that. I really appreciate that. That last part, and I'm going to tease this a bit for people that haven't read the book yet, but that last part where the investor company came in and they made some decisions that we've all seen before, the decisions that say, okay, we're going to come in, and it doesn't matter that you spent this many years building this up. It doesn't matter that you've done all this incredible relationship building with the people. It doesn't matter that you've given people the autonomy to make their decisions and own, and contribute and be a part of this. We're going to take all of that away because we have a better idea.
Yeah.
What patterns or what did you see that, that's the epitome of what most companies do. They say, oh gosh, this is working, let's go in and destroy it. What actually works against, successfully starting and scaling a company? What did you learn from that whole experience? I'll ask it a couple ways and you can take it whichever way you want.
Sure. So, and I've seen this problem over and over again. Every time I was building or I was a part of building and growing fast an international organization. Just like in every society, there's this always conflict of interest between the freedoms and the needs of an individual and the needs and the well-being of a society. And when you look at that problem from an angle of building an international organization, on one side you have this dynamics that where you want to unify as much as possible in terms of processes, because unifying processes allows you for automation. Automation allows you for faster movement and growth. However, in order to be successful in every market you're in, you need to take into account the specifics of every market. And people, when you look at growing your company to Nigeria or to United States or to Poland or South Africa, Australia, every person in every local market will tell you the exact same thing. My market is different than everyone else. And obviously, there's always this conflict of interest between becoming the best you can be in your local market, but doing that, you're always going to trump the concept of still being a centralized company that wants to be also big globally. And when you look at huge companies like, for example, Booking.com, which is the absolute leader in online hotel bookings all over the world, it's definitely an absolute leader worldwide. But then you realize that when you look at case by case, country by country, it rarely happens that they're actually the leader for every country. They've become such a big global player because they're number 3, number 4, number 5, number 2 in so many countries. Because you can't be amazing in a local aspect everywhere at once and at the same time be a global leader. And that's what happened to me, because I've gotten a huge investment from this big international player that gave me huge amounts of independence and allowed me to run my company for 3 years without any interruption, which was amazing for me. And it allowed me to become a leader in my local market. But the moment my company has become bigger and the people at the top decided now, in order to take us to the next level, we have to unify everything and centralize and do an IPO, then obviously it had to do with me giving out a lot of my independence for the bigger good. Now that I understand this and I talk about it in such a calmly way, but back then I was absolutely furious because they were essentially dismantling a huge part of my work. And I don't think you can have a cookie and eat a cookie here. But obviously, a couple of years ago, when I was a young and cocky CEO who thought he knows everything best, my response to that was slightly different.
Involved a 4-letter word, I suspect.
Yeah.
What did Nigeria teach you? You landed there as a young entrepreneur and you got this huge responsibility and you hit the ground running. You learned a lot. I mean, you learned what most companies fail to learn.
I didn't invent a light bulb. I found 1,500 ways how not to build a light bulb. Yeah, how some of this said. I think so. I want to mention 2 things. One on a personal level, and one on the business level. On a business level, this is the simple thing. Now it sounds so obvious, but back then it was a aha moment. We were into online business. We wanted to build the Amazon of Africa, the Booking.com of Africa, the Uber of Africa. We had 7 business models like this. And you realize that just because you're building an online business doesn't mean the challenges are online. Because our biggest challenges in building an e-commerce business were logistics and warehousing, because there was no DHL. There was no bookstore I could get the books from to sell them online. I have to build the offline part of the business to build online on top of it. So that was amazing eye-opener. Because there was no infrastructure to allow you to build technology business on top of it. And then on a personal level, when I arrived in Nigeria, I heard a joke. Nigerians were making fun of foreigners. The joke goes, it's a question. It goes, what's the difference between a foreigner, a tourist? No, what's the difference between a tourist and a racist? And the answer is 1 week. And actually, it's a very wise joke, because you have this problem when you're arriving in a different culture that you've been used to your own culture, which means certain way of doing things and certain way of thinking about stuff. It's so embedded in you because you were born and raised in this culture that it's just inside you on a subconscious level. And when you suddenly arrive in a new country, new region, new culture, and everything is done differently, not because it's worse or better, that's a separate conversation. It's just different, but it's also done this way. Your whole body is frustrated. Your whole body is confused on a psychological level, on a physical level. Like, why are these people eating which side do you start eating your egg, from the top or from the bottom, and so on? The difference really doesn't matter, but they frustrate you because on a subconscious level, it's different than what you're used to. And it's an easy way, and it's a thin line between a frustration and then being a bigot, xenophobe, or even racist. What I had to really learn in order not to turn my life into hell is how to unlearn everything I've learned, shut up, and just open myself. And the first couple of months that I did was all about learning and listening and acting as if I'm a child again on a cultural level, and just trying to absorb everything that is happening around me to get used to the new way of doing things. I'm going to give you an example. If we're talking now in a coffee shop, in a public space, we would probably be relatively quiet, because you don't want to mess up other people's, lunch and so on. It just would be considered rude. And if you met, if there was a couple, I don't know, a black couple talking to each other, if they were from a certain tribe from Nigeria, they're most likely to be talking very loud to each other. Because in the culture of that tribe, if you're not talking loud, that means you have something to hide. You're shady, you're a fraud. And I mean, you would probably think that they are rude, they don't know how to behave. But this is also an eye-opener. So that approach of understanding that things you're used to is just what you're used to, it's just a culture, and you have to learn how to unlearn. It's extremely important when you're running an international business, you're traveling a lot, and you're working with people coming from different backgrounds, because forget about like certain misunderstandings. It's all about how you are reacting to people doing things in a different way. So that was obvious, but very powerful lesson, which helped me many times later.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. And I know that, whenever I mention the word Nigeria, because I've been telling people about us having this conversation, and they immediately go, Nigeria, princess scams. And so it's really interesting that it was the Nigerian court system that actually stepped up for you in this process that you went through.
Yeah, that's the irony. And the moral of my story, among others, is that I really fell victim of a stereotype. Oh, you're this, unexperienced European entrepreneur. You wanna take yourself a godfather, someone that will protect you in case you're gonna get attention from the bad guys. And obviously, I had a business partnership with a huge Nigerian company that has been on the market for 30 years, because it gave me the sense of stability. Again, a very illusional one. But the people that were running this company that essentially tried to take over my company were guys with one Indian passport and 2 American passports. And the people that really helped me was my absolutely courageous Nigerian lawyer, who wasn't afraid to go to police and then got kicked out and trying to get my court documents because they disappeared. They magically disappeared, as they always do. So many other Nigerian friends. And in the end, I won the case in Nigerian federal court. I'm the first foreigner in the history of Nigeria, and I hope the last one, that took Nigerian police to court, and the judge wasn't afraid to rule in my favor. I mean, the evidence was there, so, but he wasn't afraid to rule, and in an obvious case, he might have just also, decided to, for some reasons, prolong the case, etc. So it was a lesson that, you don't want to believe stereotypes.
Yeah, no, and I really appreciate that, because it's the unexpected. People have stereotypes, they go up the ladder of inference and they decide, well, gosh, the word Nigeria means this just happened, and well, it didn't. And so that's what I find really lovely about the story, is it presents a completely different version.
Although there's one funny thing, because there's always a stereotype of this Nigerian prince that has this house full of cash just waiting to ship to you. You just have to give him your credit card. Actually, in 2014, when the new president was elected, and obviously whenever they change the power, there's this whole chase after the old power to make a statement that now it's going to be better. And there was actually a huge bust in Lagos, and it was all over in the press. There were photos. They've caught this one young guy sitting in his apartment, working at the computer, and actually in one of his rooms, the room was full of stacked dollars. And the whole Nigeria, Twitter and all the journalists, it was all over the press that this is this Nigerian guy that was sending all those emails. He's real.
Here he is.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Wow. That's a great story. I love it. There's been some kind of mention on the news, on the international news, about the need to rescue Africa as a nation out of the post-COVID, and the economic interruption, and just not only just the economic side of it, but the food security side of it, and so many aspects of what goes on in life, especially in Africa, where there's biodiversity is incredibly important. We've talked about that. Will Africa need help from the rest of the world? And if not, what needs to change?
Well, Africa definitely needs a different approach and different type of partnership or help. And it doesn't matter how you're going to call it, because what's been happening for the last 50 years or 70, depending on how you count it, after the country's political independence, it's just not working. The way countries were decolonized, giving them political independence with really no economical independence is even worse than the colonization itself, people say. There's a lot of conversation in the US and Europe about so-called stimulus packages, because they work so well when the country gets destroyed, and then you can rebuild, like Marshall Plan after the Second World War, or the Roaring Twenties after First World War in the US. But those type of stimulus packages don't work when it's not about bringing back to where we were, but strategically growing. This is why the so-called aid hasn't been working for all the decades in Africa. And if you think about it, Africa was on a stimulus plan for the last 50 years. And if you're going to throw another zero to the checks, it's not going to change anything, because the system itself is broken. In terms of Corona, Africa is really not that bad of a situation as you could expect. Obviously, people are hungry, but just because this rule of lockdown that came from China is absolutely unenforceable in Africa. First of all, there's like 8 people living on 10 square meters. You can't self-isolate them from anyone. And second of all, 85% of people in Africa live day by day. If they don't work in the morning, they won't have anything to eat in the evening. So right now in South Africa, government started deploying food, and in one small village, there's like a 5-kilometer line for the food. You can't feed all the people that cannot work. So this absolutely doesn't work, and self-isolation is already an illusion. At the same time, Africa has closed their borders relatively early. Not too many cases have been reported. And also Africa has a very young population that is actually very healthy, because there's no healthcare. So if someone was sick, that person is already dead. So those who are alive are pretty strong. Apparently, malaria has always been a problem in Africa, but seems like people, I'm just speculating now, but it seems like people who have been dealing with malaria have a higher chance of surviving Corona. And it seems that the hospitalization rate and the death rate is actually much lower than in states in Europe, where people are much older, they have civilization issues, and their bodies are in general much less immune. So definitely Africa, yes, needs a different approach to the structural economical problem, but it's not related to COVID, and just giving them an additional stimulus plan just because of COVID won't move the needle. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, great. I appreciate that, because as you said, I was saying there's been some talk about countries coming to rescue Africa, and I think it's probably one of the most ingenious communities in the world when you can give kids Android phones, and they've never seen them before, and all of a sudden, poof, they're really ingenious people. I mean, and resourceful and phenomenal. They've always blown me away with that capacity. And so as soon as you start feeding too much aid, you kill that. I think you kill that resourcefulness.
Oh yeah, I mean, intelligence is distributed more or less evenly. It's just the lack of access. I believe there were some studies I've seen about the mathematics result of kids in primary schools in the UK, and kids from Nigeria used to, score the highest among other nationalities, and I think there's something to it.
Yeah, interesting. What's next for you, Mark?
My next thing is to figure out my next thing. I had a very interesting 2 years. I don't want to spoil too much, but I was writing book with my right hand and then writing court documents with my left hand. Then I was busy with the book promotion. I kind of was recharging my batteries. You couldn't really go back to business as long as I was on Interpol list. Now that everything is over and I've recharged my batteries, I gave myself a goal that whatever I'm going to get myself involved in, because obviously I'm an entrepreneur and I'm searching for my next big thing, what to do now. I'm getting out of my comfort zone and I want to get involved for at least 10 years in this new project. Because when I look back in my life, I've had amazing adventures with a couple of companies who have done some cool things, but my adventure with each company usually ended around third or fourth year, because I'm always the most excited about the early stage. I'm slightly allergic to Excel, and once the company is big, the fun is not there anymore, for me at least. But the problem was that I was never able to build a really great company that leaves a really huge legacy. Yes, Jumia has ended up on New York Stock Exchange, and the other companies are still doing very well and they exist, but it's not what I ever wanted. And having the thought in your head that, okay, now whatever I'm going to get myself involved in, you have to stick to it 10 years. It's exciting and also very scary. And I'm taking my time to find the proper business that checks all the boxes. I'm happy with what I'm doing. It still allows me to travel and I'm making money, but it's also not too destructive not too destructive. That's a very easy goal, but it's also helping the environment in a way, and many other points. So I guess I'm taking my time to do that. Seems like it's going to be renewables. I've done e-commerce for 10 years now in total, but yeah, I'm enjoying not having to rush, and also coronavirus, maybe it's not the best to make any 10 years long decisions while not everything is yet set in stone.
Well, it hasn't stabilized yet, and let's hope when it does, it's not where it was, that it's actually that business has taken, at least from my point of view, a pretty large leap in terms of relevance to grander purpose, shall we say, bigger goals than the quarterly.
Yeah,
I think there's a real opportunity for leadership. And I hope that's taken. Where do people go for your book?
So the easiest thing to remember, if you guys are listening to this, is the website chasingblackunicorns.com. You can get there information about the book, my TED Talks, information about myself, my social media handles, as well as links to all the platforms where you can get the book, Amazon, Audible, you name it. If you don't mind me, I would like to also mention that all the revenue from this book goes to a charity, as well as all the revenue from any speaking engagement I'm getting. It all goes to that one particular thing, which you can also read about on this website, chasingblackunicorns.com. Thanks for letting me share that.
No, I'm so glad you did. Wonderful conversation. Thanks very much, Mark.
Pleasure of mine. Thank you again.
I'm Donna Jones. I provide personal growth for business, mentoring leaders and decision makers who are really ready to adapt their awareness and inner skill set to both meet and match the complexity and speed of change. I also bring intuitive insight into decision making and leadership expansion so that collaboration can benefit from conflicting perspectives and higher trust. By embedding a healthy balance between certainty and uncertainty, growth at a personal and organizational level has a serious chance. Contact me through LinkedIn or through www.FromInsightToAction.com. And it's Donna, D-A-W-N-A.